There you go.
There you go.
I don't know.
Good evening, and thank you for joining the Hudson 7 Drinking Water Council's monthly meeting. Today is Thursday, January the 21st. My name is Rebecca Martin, and I am the acting director of the Community Partnerships Program at Riverkeeper and the acting coordinator, a non-voting member, and co-organizer with Town of Hyde Park Deputy Supervisor Neil Krupnick for tonight's Hudson 7's virtual meeting. Before we begin, we would like to go over a few meeting guidelines and abbreviated procedures. The procedures are available in full on the Hudson 7's meeting page on their website, www.hudson7.org. The Hudson 7's meetings are recorded and streamed live on their YouTube channel page. A link to their page can be found on the meeting page of their website. The public is advised to subscribe to this channel to receive notifications when meetings begin. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the Hudson 7's website. If a member of the public would like to participate during the public comment section of our Zoom meetings, audio or video, pre-registration is required. Written comments may be submitted to be read on record as well. For more detailed information on how to pre-register and to submit public comment, please visit the Hudson 7's website. For those who are pre-registered this evening, once you are logged in, you will be placed in the virtual waiting room. The moderator will let you into the meeting at the appropriate time. You can watch the proceedings of the meeting via the live stream link while you are waiting. That's not applicable this evening. We don't have any public comment. Hudson 7 council members, please control your own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a Hudson 7 member wishes to speak, please raise your hand, and the chairperson, Gary Bassett, the mayor of the village of Rhinebeck, will call on you to speak. Before you speak, please state your name and your municipality or agency for any of our audio listeners. Lastly, at tonight's meeting, we have in attendance voting members, Hudson 7 Chair, the Village of Rhinebeck, Mayor Gary Bassett.
Hello, everyone.
Hudson 7 Vice Chair, Town of Poughkeepsie Supervisor J. John Baisley is not present, but voting member in the Town of Poughkeepsie. Town Board Member Bill Carlos.
Good evening.
The Hudson 7 Secretary, Town of Hyde Park Deputy Supervisor Neil Krupnick. And additional voting members, Town of Poughkeepsie Board Member, as I stated, Bill Carlos. City and Town of Poughkeepsie Water Plant Operator and Technical Advisor Randy Altstadt. Town of Esopus Supervisor Shannon Harris.
Hello.
Town of Rhinebeck Supervisor Elizabeth Spinzia.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thank you everyone for joining us.
I think that's all of the voting members, correct? I'll go into non-voting. No, we have Russell Gilmore.
Lloyd.
We have the Town of Lloyd Deputy Supervisor Russell Gilmore.
Hello, everyone. And just for the record, as of January 1st, I'm not the deputy supervisor, but the town board still appointed me to be the rep to Hudson 7.
Thanks, Russ. Non-voting members. The City of Poughkeepsie City Administrator Mark Nelson.
Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Dan Shapley, the Director of the Water Quality Program at Riverkeeper.
Hi, everyone.
Hudson 7 Technical Advisors, Paul Melmrose.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
And Emily Swinson.
Hello.
Is Town of Lloyd Neil Curry here this evening? Okay. I believe that's all. Have I missed anyone? Okay, great. On behalf of the Hudson Seven, I now turn the floor over to Chairman Gary Bassett.
Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. We have quite a full agenda this evening, and in respect for everybody's time, what I'd like to do is keep the meeting going very quickly and moving along so we have enough time for the presentation at the end. So please, if you have a comment to make, please make it brief. During the presentation by TDI and by Hudson 7 Technical Advisor, Mount Morris, please hold all your questions to the very end, and we'll have enough time for questions at that point. So with that, I'd like to get moving and go forward to approval for the minutes for 11/19/20. Seems like it's been a while since we met. We did not have a December meeting. So I make a motion to approve the minutes on 11/19/20. Do I have a second? Bill Carlos, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand and aye. Aye is
Aye.
fine. Opposed? So carried. Very good, thank you. Communications. Rebecca, we do have a couple communications that came in. Could you just briefly read those in for us, the record?
Sure, and these are amendments, and the new agenda is posted on the Hudson Seven's website, as well as source materials that came in late. Jessica Coonan wrote in as a follow-up to alert the Hudson 7 that the Sea Grant Great Lakes Transport Extension Educator Position announcement is now posted. And on the University of Minnesota Human Resources job page, all of which can be found in our agenda on the Hudson 7's website. Position opens on January the 15th, and the applicant review starts February the 19th. The second communication that came in were comments from the Hudson River Safety, Navigation, and Operations Committee concerning the Champlain Hudson Power Express, CHIPPE, that was received or stamped on January the 8th, 2021. It's a resolution. Be it resolved that the Hudson River Safety, Navigation, and Operations Committee shall advise the regulatory agencies having jurisdiction over permitting the placement of structures such as cables and pipelines on or under the bed of the Hudson River of its deep concerns that the placement of structures of any type only be permitted in a way that will ensure the ability of commercial vessels to anchor in the Hudson River in a manner that will ensure the safety of the vessel, crew, cargo, other vessels, and local communities. That's all, Gary.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I believe we stated already there are no public comments, just to make sure to validate that. Is anybody for public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on. Reports and actions for old business. Hudson River Source Water Protection Initiative, the Central Hudson plan. Randy, was that you that was going to give an update for that, please?
Yeah, Randy Alstead. I just wanted to say that in December, they did their pilot testing, and the pilot test was to learn if their dredging equipment, the new equipment they got, would be performed properly, and also whether the treatment systems would perform properly. They did 3 locations. They did a clean area, then they did a more contaminated area, and then they did a real contaminated area. During that time, 5 sheens were found on the surface, so 5 reportable spills happened. They completed it in mid-December, and now they're working up a report that's got to go to DEC, and then hopefully it'll be available for review. That's it.
Thank you, Randy. All right, next on the agenda was the SOPAS releases. We have 2 comments on that. One from Technical Advisor Dan Shapley, and then Shannon Harris would like to give us an update on what's town of SOPAS. So first, Dan.
Okay, I'll be very brief. This is a pretty complicated issue that goes back more than 10 years. But in essence, New York City operating the Ashokan Reservoir, there's highly turbid water that sometimes enters that reservoir in heavy storms. that flows, the sediment flows into the reservoir, and then the city's management of the reservoir includes right now a protocol that allows it to discharge very, very, very heavily turbid water into the Esopus Creek, which then flows down the creek and into the Hudson River. I believe that town of Esopus and Poughkeepsie have seen some of the data from their intakes, and it's pretty evident that this sediment is detectable at the treatment plants. So we are trying to gather information right now from the operators, and I hope we can get your help in doing that. Paul has reached out to them. I think several of them are on the line today, but we really want to understand the impact of those releases are, because right now there's a public comment period that's open until March 16th. Currently, it might be extended, but right now, March 16th, that will affect the management of those releases. There's a technical presentation that'll be on January 25th that we can circulate information about for Hudson 7 folks to join. And there's a hearing on February 4th about this issue. Now, concurrent with that, and I got ahead of myself a little bit, but concurrent, there happens to have been a big storm right around Christmas that resulted in excess turbidity being discharged from the reservoir to the creek. And that's what I was referencing when I said that the Hudson 7 intakes are detecting that heavy turbidity. So Randy and Poughkeepsie and Don Kiernan in Esopus and the staff there, we've been in touch with, and we're trying to get some samples of raw water saved tomorrow over the course of several hours, sample hourly, and stick those samples in the refrigerator so that they can be analyzed with a more sophisticated analysis that Ulster County's used in the past that kind of fingerprints where the sediment comes from in order to document if, in fact, this excess turbidity being observed at the treatment plants is from the Esopus. Because if it is, then it can affect, hopefully, the decisions being made about managing those releases. So again, there's a lot more complexity here and a lot more detail. I hope that's a little bit of an introduction to the issue. And we can follow up more with more information about some of the public comment process and some of the data collection that we hope to do in partnership with the Hudson 7.
Thank you, Randy. Shannon, good evening.
Hi, good evening, guys. I just wanted to update you that on our supervisors and mayors call earlier this week, it was well noted by a lot of the supervisors that their municipalities were somehow impacted by the release of the turbid water and debris. And one of the supervisors is connected with the Ashokan Reservoir Working Group and began to share with the others some of their minutes and updates. And it's a group that produces a lot, and looks like it's really hard to stay on top of them. So he offered to set up a meeting with some of those folks and loop us into the emails the updates, the monthly updates, which I guess I know some folks on your side, Dan, like Victoria Lung and others, are looped into that already. But I think this time Rebecca approached me because this last storm was very extreme in terms of the debris that was released as part of that process that they do. And I think it's important to observe and analyze what impact on the water intake valves it has, its title. And I think Esopus is probably one of the first, and probably I don't know how much town of Ulster would be impacted by this. I know that Kingston observes it in their creek, although Kingston is also a contributor to some degree of other types of particles in the creek. So I think a SOAP is really along the lines, and it's observable all the way from down in Poughkeepsie. So I don't know how much across the channel it makes it, but I think it's great that we're testing. I think we need to be having this on our radar so that we can know in advance or what kind of weather conditions in advance would precipitate an event where they're going to release. It's usually during the winter when there's lots of snow. And so I think that we need to maybe get testing started a little earlier to truly understand the impact and what additional chemicals are needed to treat this, or additional processes, or if it's passed down the supply chain. So one of the supervisors is going to call a Zoom meeting with some of the folks from DEC to explain to the others how this process occurs, why. I understand it's been looked at a lot. I'm not sure how much there can be done. I'm going to participate in that and then separately work with all of you via our water superintendents to do some analysis, at least now, and try and understand the impact and really be able to explain it to the public and understand it ourselves. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks to Don Kiernan at your drinking water plant for his assistance.
I will. I'll thank him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. All right, so next is new business. The only new business we have on the agenda tonight is to approve our meetings for the rest of the year. From now through November, we did not meet in December, so I'd like to make a motion to set our current monthly meetings, from on the third Thursday of each month through November, starting at 5:30 p.m. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried. Thank you. Okay, now it's time for the presentations. I'd just like to do a little brief into this. This is a very important subject that we're doing with the Champaign Hudson Power Electric line. And we all are getting together really for the first time. Jen, thank you for coming and presenting to our group. We're very interested in hearing what you have to say and learning more about this project. But again, this is our first time. I do not expect that we will get all the answers and have have everything completed by today, but it'd be nice if we could, formulate that towards the end of the meeting and possibly set up another workshop for more discussions if needed afterwards. Okay, so with that, I'd like to have the presentations. Please do your best to adhere to the time. Please don't be offended if I ask you and say you have 2 minutes left, to go through. And we will reserve questions to the very end. We have reserved time at the end of the meeting for questions. So thank you, everybody. The only other thing is, Rebecca, I think it'd be nice to introduce some of the people who are, or have the people who are online here go around and just call their name out, have them call their name out or introduce who they are and who they represent before we start.
Great. I can take us around so that it moves swiftly. So let's look at Marie, you're first in the window. Marie Brule. Okay, we can come back. Jennifer White.
First of all, I want to thank all of you. I'm Jen Laird White. I do external affairs for transmission developers, and I want to thank you all for inviting us to come. We're grateful to be here. As I said earlier, I don't know if you heard this, I'm just the organizer, the arranger. I was happy to do so. I'm going to hand this over to my colleagues, Sean Murphy, who is a longtime regulatory and permitting consultant for the project, and Jean Martin, who's our president and COO, although they should probably introduce themselves. But again, thank you for having us. Thank you for taking this time. We are grateful.
Thanks, Jennifer. Sean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Sean Murphy. I've been working on this project since 2009. I was the lead project manager for the regulatory process of it. And I will not claim when I started this, I was less gray and don't have an infallible memory. So we'll see what we can do to get as many answers for you tonight. And as Gary suggested, there may need to be a follow-up meeting to clear up some of the memory gaps.
Thank you. Jean?
Yeah, I'm Gene Martin. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer for TDI, and I've been with the organization for 7 years as of January. And, you know, my background is in the engineering and construction world. So looking forward to having this introductory meeting. I know some of you have had a good background on this project, but, you know, we're anxious to, you know, get some of the what I would call fundamentals out on the table and hopefully get people informed respective of where we're going and how we're going and, you know, make people comfortable with our approach. So.
Great. Europa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Europa McGovern. I'm the representative for Ulster County from the County Department of the Environment.
Thank you, Europa. Erin?
Was that Erin?
Yeah, it's you.
I'm just another tie-in bonder, co-worker of Paul Malmrose, who has attended meetings in the past and was very interested in this presentation. Nice to see you all.
Okay, I guess I would ask if you'd like to introduce yourself. If your video is not on, please turn on your video. Otherwise, we'll anticipate that you would rather not be. Great. Fran?
Hi, how are you? Fran Dunwell from DEC. It's the first meeting of yours I've attended, but glad to be here. Thanks.
Thanks for coming. George? Oh, you're on mute, George.
George Shackman from Riverkeeper, Senior Habitat Restoration Manager.
Grant?
Hi, I'm Grant Jang. I'm with the New York State Department of Health. I'm the Source Water Protection Coordinator for the metropolitan area, which includes Ulster and Dutchess counties.
Okay, great. If your camera is not on, I'm assuming you don't want to introduce yourself, so I can move forward. Give you another minute, just in case.
Not everybody has cameras.
Is that Lee? So Lee,
Yes.
want to introduce yourself?
I'm Lee Felshin. I'm the supervising public health engineer at Dutchess County Department of Health, and we oversee and regulate water systems pursuant to Part 5 of the State Sanitary Code, among other things.
Thank you, Lee. All right, I'll run through. Jason?
Hi, this is Jason. I'm with the Dutchess County Department of Health as well, a senior public health engineer, and I oversee the town of Hyde Park, which has the surface water plant off the Hudson River.
Thank you. Marie? Kelly?
Good evening. My name is Kelly Torturo. I'm the Regional Director for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Hudson Valley office.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for coming. Minsuk?
Hi, I'm with the New York State Department of Health Bureau of Water Supply Protection. I'm a professional engineer. Happy to be here.
Heather?
Yes, hi, my name is Heather Gearloff. I'm with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in Marine Habitat and the Research Reserve Manager.
Marie? Third time's a charm. Okay. Jim?
Oh, yeah. Hey, how you doing, everyone? I got booted from the meeting. I just was able to log back in.
Jim, would you introduce yourself and who you represent, please?
Yep, Jim Teed with the Dutchess County Department of Behavioral Community Health.
Okay, have I missed anyone?
Yes, hi, this is Minzy. I'm from the New York State Health Department Regional Office.
Thank you. Okay, I believe that's all. Jean,
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, so let's get started. Jen, you're up first, please. We have 15 minutes.
I actually think it's Jean Martin's up first.
Yes, so good evening. Thanks again for inviting us. Rebecca, are you going to control the slides? Is that the plan? Okay.
Jean, when you're ready to move on, you can just say next slide and I'll.
Okay, I sure will.
For you.
All right, so let's go to slide 1, which will. I believe that's the last slide, Rebecca, that you have up.
Thanks, I'll be right there.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm ready to conclude if that's in
More time for questions.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. So, the first thing we thought we would do would just be to do a quick overview of the project. This project is 334 miles longitudinally from north to south from the Canadian border to the Astoria complex in Queens. It also encompasses 34 miles in Canada with our partner Hydro-Quebec. Hydro-Quebec will be building one of the converters that converts AC to DC power. That converter will be located at their Hertel substation, which is on their 735 kV bus up in the Quebec area. All of the cabling will either be underground or underwater for the entire DC route, including the Canadian portion. The projects will meet at the international border in where Lake Champlain and the Richelieu River meet, which is the authorized presidential permit point for the crossing of the international border. We plan to provide 1,250 megawatts with this project. The project will be 400 kV DC XLEE. We will be delivering approximately 10.4 terawatt hours a year of hydro renewable energy. We will be looking at a target in-service of 2025. That in-service is the fourth quarter of 2025. Late fourth quarter is what we expect now. This is a transmission project utilizing technology that's been out there for a very long time, so we expect at least a 40-year operating life. We expect that this project's going to replace a very significant portion of the retiring Indian Point generation. This is a merchant transmission project. as versus a utility or rate-based project. This project will be funded by commercial lenders and by private equity. So this will not be funded by the state of New York or by state funds, etc. It will be funded by, again, our owners, Blackstone, and then we will be going into the commercial market to commercial lenders for the debt portion of the project. We expect to produce some very significant tax revenue. We also, think that tax revenue, there's 1.7 billion, you can see it, impacts about 73 municipalities and about 59 school districts in New York State. I guess that's not surprising when you see the 333-mile north to south, project that we're impacting a lot of municipalities and a lot of school systems. Regulatory and community support. We do have every one of our major permits. That process started 10 years ago. So this project has been in development for at least 10 years, even a little earlier in the Canadian portion of the project. The project, has the major permits you might imagine, which are coming up. We'll talk a little bit about them. We have gotten quite a few endorsements, just about from everybody. Notably, I know there's some riverkeeper folks on the phone who might quibble with that, but I think we've gotten very broad support across the project, including now from all of the unions, the host communities, and the vast majority of environmental organizations, including the environmental representation of the federal and state regulatory agencies. We have resolutions from 28 of those municipalities, representing support for the project. We've done a lot of work, and a lot more work is being done, frankly, right now, that's being updated in anticipation of a NYSERDA submission. So NYSERDA is out for a Tier 4 REC. That will be due in May, and that will be for 1,500 megawatt. And that 1,500 megawatts will be called Tier 4. And those Tier 4 RECs must have a transmission interconnection, must have a renewable source of power, must be delivered into the city of New York as in-city capacity. Of course, this project qualifies in all three respects, and we are preparing diligently to respond to that RFP, including updating our environmental and economic benefits associated with the project, jobs, etc. Next slide, Rebecca. I mentioned the permits. The three critical permits are the Article 7 siting permit, which is the certificate of public need. We received that in April of 2013. We got our presidential permit signed by President Obama in October of 2014. I think it's one of 4 that were issued. And we have the Army Corps permits that were issued in April of 2015. Of course, as a corollary to the Army Corps permits, we also had a 6-year process that we did consultations with the United States Coast Guard, which also involved the maritime community that provided the comments that you read into the record at the beginning of this meeting. So the record on those discussions is quite replete and certainly available for those that are interested. Rebecca, next slide. The Hudson River team. TDI, that's us, Transmission Developers. We are headquartered in two places. One is Albany. So we have what we affectionately refer to as our global headquarters in downtown Albany. And we also have a series of couple offices in New York, New York. We, like I said, started this in 2008. It's been a very long journey with a lot of work. The record on this project could probably fill a good sized closet at this point. You know, we were bought by our owners, Blackstone, about 8 years ago, and they are the equity and development investor in this project. And I can tell you that they and Hydro-Quebec have been absolutely funding this project for the last 8 years, you know, to get us to where we are today. Intertek is a very significant player in the consulting world in marine environments. We engaged Intertek over the 6-year period that we interfaced with the marine community, as well as the United States Coast Guard, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, because of course we needed 2 principal permits to be in the water bodies, the federal water bodies, the Hudson River, by example, the subject of today's discussion. And you know, they were very, very helpful. If you're interested in the work that METOC and also called Intertek did for our project, there is in the public record a navigational risk assessment that goes through literally the entire Hudson River and does a series of interaction calculations based on water, you know, river traffic and a host of other elements. We needed that for the United States Coast Guard and for the permit with the Corps. And we also needed that to determine, you know, get comfortable about the insurability and our practices for installation. Caldwell Marine International, they are our marine contractor. I think they are the best marine contractor in the metropolitan area, i.e. the tri-state area. They have a lot of experience, over 60 years in the marine installation game. They're out of Caldwell, New Jersey, and have local yards in the New York area. And they are our selected subcontractor to the cable supplier for the installation in the Hudson River. There are websites for each one of these Intertek's, ours, as well as Caldwell Marine. If you have particular interest in project backgrounds or that sort of thing, irrespective of Caldwell, by example, certainly take a look at their website, and I'm sure you'll get a lot more material on such a thing. They're a very big business. They're part of a big group of companies that happens to be Hispanic owned. And they have, you know, their bonding lines are great evidence of that. I mean, they're over $500 million respective of bonding lines. Rebecca, let's go to the next one. We're going to have to design barges for the water bodies because I have particular issues related to depths, clearances, bridge openings we need to get through, you know, a whole host of things. And we are designing a DP2 barge for the Hudson River jet plow installation. This is a general drawing of that barge. You know, this, and one of the things I'd like to say before I get into a bit more of this is, you know, one, we're not going to be in the Hudson River till 24 and 25. So we have plenty of time together to make sure that we get this right. So it's not like we're going to be there tomorrow. You know, we're not planning to install and to be in that river body until 2024 and 2025. So, you know, just wanted to get that up front. The second thing I wanted to mention is we do have a process that's been denoted by the United States Coast Guard and by our permit with the Army Corps of Engineers. It has a whole host of reporting requirements as to where we are from a construction perspective, where we are on the river, a whole bunch of notifications. And certainly, again, that's in the public record. But you know, there's a lot of detail about how we're actually going to do this installation in the Hudson. And of course, I will paraphrase such a thing. Rebecca, next slide. The transmission cable.
Gene, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. The transmission cables are 2 5-inch cables that'll be armored with steel armoring. Those cables are going to go into a 2-foot trench. They are solid dielectric. They have no fluids whatsoever, and they're DC based. So we have a lot of characteristics. There's no emissions whatsoever from these in terms of fluids because there is none. The installation will be done by jet plow. Jet plow installation will be a 2-foot wide trench. We've studied this quite a bit. The trench at a very significant level. The sediments go back into the trench. It's designed to do that, okay? And I think a really important point is that we will pass all 7 of the Hudson 7 intakes in approximately 2 weeks. Okay, so we're going to be there and gone at a minimum rate of at least 300 feet per hour. And we're going to have a very minimal trench. And, you know, we think that there's an opportunity. We discussed this earlier. You know, we could, if you guys could shut off, we're going to notify. Let's go to the next slide, because I only have another minute or two. There's a picture of a plow, right? That plow was for 15-foot burials by Caldwell Marine in the New York City harbor. Obviously, our plow is going to be quite a bit smaller with a 7-foot requirement, but that's essentially what the sled looks like. Next. Let's go to the next one. Okay, did I say, I didn't see that map, but you know, long story short, I had an example of the Port Ewan process.
There's a couple slides up, Gene.
Yeah, could you go up? I think it's right here. No, slide 8. Slide 8.
Nope. 2 slides
Nope.
before that, 6.
No, because slide 6. Sorry. And just so if you look on the right, you'll see we gave you an example of Port Ewan. So we will notify time 0. We will notify a mile before we get to Port Ewan, inform the operator. In roughly 9 miles will be a half mile closer. We'll inform again. We're within a half mile of the intake. In 18 hours, we will be effectively at the intake. In 26 hours, we'll be a half mile away. And it will be 35 hours, will be another mile away from that. So we believe, based on the analyses that we've done, that, you know, there is a real opportunity to store. We can go by the way, that when we're at that point where we're next to the intake, of course, we can do that in consultation with the operators. So if that needs to be at night, at a point when the intakes are shut down, you know, where you have low demand, certainly we can cross that intake at that point, albeit that we think the impacts from this 2-foot trench in the plow system are going to be extremely limited. So I guess I'm out of time.
Please?
I guess I'm out of time, Gary, so I'll let Sean take over.
Well, no, if you take a minute to summarize if you would like.
No, I'm fine. I mean, what I'm saying in effect is that, I think that the disturbance that we're going to create relative to the technology and the 2-foot trench, the speed by which we are going to bypass the entire water intake system of all 7 of the Hudson group, I say that's essentially 2 weeks. We're going to be in lunchtime, we'll be there and gone by these intakes, and we can schedule when we pass them. So I think operationally that, we're in a pretty good place, respective of what we do specifically with the location of the cables. That's something we're open to discussing within the parameters of our permits, i.e. what we have to avoid environmentally for exclusion zones, etc., avoiding the federal navigation channel, and balancing the interest of all those things, including yours, through the EM and CP process, which is going to come somewhat down the road, a lot more detail of the route. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure there'll be questions.
Thank you, Gene. It appears we're going to be over, so I hope everybody can hang in there for a little bit, because I really want to give some time for some questions at the end.
I apologize. It's just so much to talk about.
I agree, and this is our first meeting, and so we'll figure this out. Paul, are you ready?
Are you gonna? Okay, so are we done? Is Sean gonna get 5 minutes or so to hit on the models, or do you want to do that another time?
Let's get through Paul's presentation and then we'll decide.
Okay.
Paul, you need to unmute.
Okay. Well, Gene, thank you very much. And Sean, I hope we can hear from you after I finish mine. I want to thank you guys for all the information. And I guess we spent probably an hour and a half on Zoom. What would we do without Zoom, right? So my name is Paul Malmrose. I'm a technical advisor for the Hudson 7, and I'm also a senior consultant with Ty and Bond. I have nearly 48 years of experience in water treatment engineering. So today I want to talk about, will this project protect the Hudson River drinking water supply? And the Hudson 7 has really some serious concerns about the project. The project was developed without adequate input from the Hudson 7 and the New York State Department of Health. Now, we don't fault TDI for that, because most people in this area and most companies don't even realize that the Hudson River is used for drinking water. And that's why the Hudson 7 was formed about 2.5 years ago to resolve that problem. The construction will present really unacceptable risk to 106,000 people, 3 hospitals, 3 colleges, and even a potential risk to TDI. We can hardly imagine what would happen if a hospital lost water for a day or two. So we don't want to have anything like Flint, Michigan. The TDI plan protections are flawed, inadequate, and not preventative. And a terrestrial route must be considered. What really got us concerned was that jet plowing will churn up pollutants, which will remain in suspension at the bottom of the river where our intakes are located. And that really showed itself when I was able to find a video on jet plowing. Just what I thought. Okay. So I really had a hard time finding an underwater shot of this. So I had to go to the Europeans, especially the Dutch, to find this. So this is jet plowing. I believe it's in the ocean. I don't know all the details, but here you can see the cable and the jet plow going over it, forming a trench. So what I'd like to just show you is this is the front, hardly any turbidity, suspended solids, but let's look at what happens at the back end. So this is the back end of it. I don't know why they put a dead fish in there. That was not a really good marketing strategy on their part. But here is the trench. And you can see all the action. As Jean mentioned, most of it is in the trench. But what I'm looking at here is this trench is only about 12 to 18 inches deep. And you can see that there forms a cloud behind this, which is really kind of concerning to us and our intakes. Because what we're really concerned is what is the turbidity in the total suspended solids at the river bottom, not at the surface. So after talking to Jean and Sean, I felt that they really did an outstanding job in looking at these four things: fish in the environment, marine traffic, soil conditions, for example, is there bedrock in the area, and the infrastructure of cables crossing the river or our intake structures as shown below. But we think the top priority should be protecting the drinking water for 106,000 people to prevent a risk to them and a risk basically to TDI. Now, we're not saying that the other four are important. We believe they are also important, but we think the top priority should be our drinking water. Now, TDI in 2010 asked our water operators several questions about their intakes. And all of these questions were really good. For example, coordinates for the intake to find its location, its depth, its the flow rates, the size of the intakes. But do you see any questions about, I'm sorry, do you see any questions about protecting drinking water? And my question is, did New York State DOH review any of this information or anything that TDI is doing? Now here is the location of the intakes in relationship to the transmission line. The transmission line is in red here, and the intakes are in yellow as shown here. Now these drawings are from the final environmental impact statement done by TDI, but these didn't show any of the intakes. I had to show them on the drawings. And Jean was kind enough to give me more detailed drawings yesterday, and I took a look at them, and there's a lot of information about restrictions for DEC, fish, maritime, utility crossings, all those things, and all of them are important, but it's nothing about our intakes. So just to give you some reference, this is the Rhine-Cliff Kingston Bridge, and here's the Rhinebeck intake. It's about 2,000 feet from the transmission line. And my readings and quick research on this indicates that jet plowing could affect the turbidities and PDSs about a half a mile away. So all the intakes are within a half a mile. And here's the Esopus intake, which is almost right on the line, and very concerning to me. The next is Hyde Park, that plant is run by Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, and that's about 1,000 feet from the pipeline. What's a real concern is the two intakes for Poughkeepsie. It appears to us that the transmission line goes right in between both of them. So they're definitely going to be affected. Now, the Lloyd intake wasn't even discussed at all in the environmental impact statement. And we would like to get some more information to TDI about that. Now, here are all the pollutants from the sediment. And this is according to TDI's final environmental impact statement. So you can see that there's quite a few, and a lot of them are pretty concerning. But these are the ones in orange that I'm showing you now are the only ones that TDI is going to monitor for during their operations around our intakes. And they include PCBs, heavy metals, and total suspended solids. But what about the dioxins, the petroleum compounds, the PHAs, the pesticides, and the turbidity? We're really concerned about the PAHs because they actually float, so they're never going to settle. And that's been our problem with the current rehabilitation that Central Hudson is doing. The other pollutants that we're kind of concerned about that should be monitored are total organic carbon. Total organic carbon can form cancer-causing compounds regulated by EPA and the health department. Most of those total organic carbons are in the dissolved form, so they will remain in solution after being churned up in the river. And because the river is an estuary, the water will be going up and down the river depending on the tide. The new compound that everyone is becoming scared of is Pfas. And that's a newly regulated cancer-causing compound. It was found in Newburgh, as all of us know, Housatonic Falls, Rockland County, and many places across the country. Now, I'd like to share a little bit of information about the Central Hudson remediation
All you have
project.
3 minutes.
Okay. The company and the regulators didn't perceive risk to the intakes. The model didn't accurately show that the PAHs would be dispersed in the estuary. The project contaminated the intakes very quickly. The result was a multi-million-dollar re-engineering pilot and testing and a multi-year delay of the project. Our lessons learned were we should be focusing on prevention, not just reacting to pollution spill. Pilot testing is a must in the Hudson area. So we looked at the monitoring program that TDI was proposing, and we believe that any monitoring program should be approved by the health department. Now, TDI will monitor for total suspended solids before and after the plowing excrement. So they'll monitor it here and after the jet plowing. Now, in the Hudson River, if the difference gets greater than 200 milligrams per liter, they will take action. In Lake Champlain, if the difference is 100, they'll take action. And we're kind of wondering why we have our precious drinking water, that there would be a higher differential between the inlet and the before and after. Now, TDI will report to the Department of Public Service and DEC if this limit is exceeded, and they will modify their operations, but they won't stop the operations, and they won't even notify the health department.
Paul,
A
1 minute,
preventative
please
approach would be
summarize.
to continuously monitor turbidity and stop the operation at a difference of 100 NTUs, and to monitor all the pollutants of concern. Now, on the treatment
Paul, you have
plan,
Paul, you have 1 minute, please summarize.
okay, so at the water treatment plants, TDI will take action only after an MCL is exceeded in the finished water. So step one was they will modify the operation if it's exceeded, but there are no notification to DOH. If a modifications do not work, then they shut down. This will allow polluted water to enter the distribution system in our customers' homes for days or weeks without us even knowing, while we wait for laboratory results. So a more preventative approach would be to monitor the raw water as it comes into the plant. And if the turbidities exceed 50 or the TOC increases by more than 1.5 milligrams per liter, the operation should be shut down. And once again, we recommend that all pollutants be monitored. So why not a terrestrial route? The route is terrestrial north of Ulster and Dutchess County. When we were talking to Gene and Sean, they said we couldn't go on the CX Railroad because they're planning to build another track next to the one that's there, so there's no right-of-way there. We asked them, why not the New York State Thruway? And they said, the Thruway said no at the start of the project in 2008, 2010. But how about now in 2021? The New York State Thruway said yes to the Pilgrim Pipeline, so why couldn't we use the Pilgrim Pipeline? And with that, we could go the Northway, the New York State Thruway. In fact, the line crosses the Thruway several times. So what we're looking at is following this route of the pipeline, and then at the New Jersey line, continue on the Thruway to the Mario Cuomo Bridge, and then go into the Hudson River and terminate at in Queens.
Paul,
So my
please wrap it
final
up.
question is, would New York City allow jet plowing in the Ashokan Reservoir? They wouldn't even allow a rail trail along their reservoir for over 6 years. So that's my presentation. So I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Gene. Okay, we're at 6:35. I knew we were going to run over. I hope people are willing to stay for a few minutes. I would like to open it up for questions. And Rebecca, could you just call on the questions? I see Bill has his hand up right away.
Sure. I also, before questions too, Gary, I thought I heard Gene say that Sean had some closing thoughts. I don't know if that's something Sean wants to do briefly before we get into Q&A, or
let's see how the questions go, and maybe we can incorporate that in. I think that the questions you're going to ask, if you're basing on Paul's presentation, and thank you, Paul, we may be able to respond to those through that as well. So
thank you, Sean. It's generous. Appreciate that. Okay, Bill Carlos, Town of Poughkeepsie.
Thank you. Gene, I think this is a very good project. You've obviously spent millions and millions of dollars and have worked on it very hard. I'm a retired chief of police. The municipality I served in was inside the 10-mile circle for Indian Point. That means quarterly, I had to attend all the trainings and the drills, and every time there was a problem, I had to do it. And what I learned was, it's not the event. It's the sequence that happens after the event. For example, if your jet plow should hit one of our intakes because you're going between them, or put stuff into the intakes which we cannot process for drinking water, we have to shut down. If the town of Poughkeepsie, if the water plant has to shut down, the town of Poughkeepsie and the city of Poughkeepsie have worked very hard to build in a reserve. We were at about 36 hours between what the city did in keeping their reservoir open and the town did in opening some pumps. We're probably close to 40 hours, maybe even 44, 48 hours. After that, there's no water in the water mains. To flush toilets, to put fires out. I immediately think of the two hospitals, Vassar and Mid-Hudson. They cannot keep patients in those hospitals if they can't put fires out and can't flush the toilets. Where are they going to go? How are we going to get them there? That's well beyond Dutchess County's ability and New York State's ability. It would be a significant event to just move people. In New York, I'm sure you're aware of this, and I'm sure your lawyers have probably even said it to you. If you're aware of a risk and you consciously disregard it, you're acting recklessly. We've just made you aware of this risk. Please take this into consideration, modify, change, do what has to be done. This is not a regular part of the river. This is a drinking water source. Read the word reservoir. Thank you.
Bill, was that a statement or a question, just to make sure?
Statement.
Okay. Sean or Jean? Or next question.
Yes. So let me just take a step back here. I mean, I want to be clear that and we've had this conversation with Paul a little bit about a lot of the discussions that happened for this project were done under the settlement process, and so we are somewhat hands tied in terms of what we can talk about. But we are open now, and we're glad they're having this dialogue now in an open forum where we can have discussions about it. The idea that water intakes was not discussed is just inaccurate. There is an exhibit from a firm called ESS. It was a report commissioned by Scenic Hudson and Riverkeeper, and they specifically brought up water intakes as one of the issues. They felt like what we had done had been sufficient, but I will tell you that that wasn't enough. We had other conversations that went on as well. We can talk a little bit about the total suspended solids. The numbers through the section of river we're going through don't rise above 10 milligrams per liter at any point. We understand modeling isn't something that people are necessarily trusting because of recent events in the area, which is why we are doing the pre-installation testing. Paul, you're absolutely right. We should be doing it in this area as a way of making sure that what the model says, to calibrate the model to make sure the model says. We are doing continuous monitoring of both TSS and turbidity. I guess it's not clear through some of our plans that this is continuous monitoring, but this is in the field. Laboratory tests are being sent out, but those are only being used to calibrate. So Bill, I hear what you're saying, and we appreciate the opportunity to have this this dialogue with you. And I as Jean mentioned up front, these sort of comments are what we want to incorporate as part of the environmental management and construction plan as we go forward.
Sean, I'm available to you with a phone call. No problem.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary?
Yes, thank you, Sean. I just wanted to reemphasize that our focus is really on, we need to prevent this no matter how we can. And our water plants, there is 5 water plants that serve these 7 municipalities. We're not set up to do the testing, on a real-time basis, hour by hour that's needed. So we need to be able to either change the route or be able to establish a way to do this testing. And so
we have provided as a condition.
How do we do that?
Oh, sorry. One of our conditions is that we provide exactly the money for that real-time testing at your plants. Some of it you're already doing. Some of you I know from talking to the operators are doing continuous turbidity monitoring. Those who aren't, there's funding available for doing that. There's funding available for doing the laboratory testing. I mean, we anticipated this, how that works. If we're just the certificate conditions, the background information, it doesn't specifically state, and we would expect this would be operator preference. If they want, TDI to have consultants in there doing this, that's one thing. If Randy would rather have his own people doing this, that's another thing. We'll pay for the testing, we'll pay for the time.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone on the phone who doesn't have a camera that wishes to ask a question?
George?
I don't really have a question as much as a statement, you know. As Gene mentioned, he said there's some from Riverkeeper that might have some quibbles. We don't have quibbles. We have some real concerns. We have reverse course on support of this project. And because new environmental information and new relationships with Indigenous people in Eastern Canada has informed our new concerns. We realize the project is bad for Indigenous societies and continues a perpetuation of an assault on Native peoples for money. And it is bad for the Hudson River and life in the Hudson River, which has been assaulted for centuries as well, all for money. That's all I'm going to say is our statement. We are bound, we can't say much, but that's about what I'll say. New information has come to light that caused us to reverse course. And these are not quibbles. These are real concerns about real people.
Shannon?
I wanted to know if the alternative path that Paul outlined down the thruway was considered.
It was. There's an alternatives analysis, and I provided it to Paul earlier to, I guess it was yesterday, Paul, we sent it to you. As part of the process back in 2010, the Department of Public Service offered 3 different alternatives for the project. One of them is what they called the Hudson Western Railway, that basically would have gone from, I think it's Bethlehem south to Clarkstown area. And we did a mile by mile by mile analysis of that. And the documents that we provided were not only done for the Department of Public, for the settlement parties, and it's a public document. We released it as part of the joint proposal for settlement, but we also did that same analysis for the Department of State, who has a separate obligation as part of this under the coastal zone management process to issue a certificate as well. That same analysis was done by the Army Corps. Paul, I didn't provide that to you, but I'd be happy to provide the alternatives analysis the Army Corps had us do. Lots and lots of people looked at this closely to try to find out when we could be outside the Hudson River. Based on the analysis we did at that time, and as far as I can sit here and say right now, based on what we know right now, there's no way these cables can be installed and adhere to good engineering practices outside of the Hudson River in this section.
Well,
we could be this would be a longer conversation, Paul, for us to go through mile by mile, but we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and let's also hear from people who haven't had a chance to speak yet. That would be great tonight. Mark Nelson, City of Poughkeepsie.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. So just one quick question, and Sean, I'll direct this to you. So in the PowerPoint that Paul presented, the thing that really jumped out at me, well, a lot of things jumped out at me, but can you speak for another minute about the testing and the monitoring? So, and I don't know, maybe Paul can put that slide up, but on the left side, we had all the things that you're testing for and monitoring and turbidity and so forth. And then I've got on the right side of that PowerPoint slide, I've got a whole bunch of things, including the PAHs and other things that, am I hearing this correctly, that there is no testing or monitoring for those items? Did I get that right?
So what Paul cited, and if you want to bring it up, Paul, that would be fine. But he cited an environmental impact statement. I want to be clear, TDI did not write that. It was written by the Department of Energy using an outside consultant, Kleinschmidt & Associates. They weren't affiliated with us. We had no relationship with them. It's an independent document developed by the Department of Energy. So I want to be clear about that, it's for our project, but we didn't author it. And the analysis that Paul has there shows a list of chemicals that were talked about as part of it. Those are chemicals that are in around the Hudson River. Those are not necessarily chemicals that when we did sediment testing through your stretch of the waterway, we found. I'd have to go back and look at the record. I'd be happy to do that for you, Mark, to look at what chemicals were actually found when we did sediment testing for the 16 miles of range for the Hudson 7. But the Hudson River is a complex body with a lot of different industrial uses that have happened. A PA, they mentioned a list of chemicals along the Hudson River. It's a broad stroke. It's not necessarily what we'd find next to your individual intake system.
Great, Sean. And then just as a quick follow-up, so I appreciate you disavowing the authorship of that EIS, but I guess the question then becomes, are you buying into that EIS or are you disavowing the EIS? I mean, you didn't author it, but
it's not. So let me say this. I think we are avowing its overall conclusions as to the level of impacts associated with the project. It's not how I would have written it because of exactly the sort of questions you're asking right here.
Yeah.
The sort of broad brushes don't necessarily work when an individual town is interested in their intake system. I actually wanted to just quickly respond to something else Paul said. Paul noted that the maps we sent him yesterday didn't show the intake systems. At the time we were writing all of this, we were being told very clearly to not indicate on a map where your intake systems were, because this is back, at a time period where people were very concerned about critical infrastructure and protecting the location of it. So it's not that we didn't know, and Paul, you can sort of see from the way the line goes, we clearly were trying to avoid intake systems where we could, but we were not providing them on maps because we were told not to do that. So.
Got it.
Sorry, does that help, Mark?
It does, Sean. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then Gary, if you want to follow up with next steps, that would be terrific. Any more questions? One more? And thanks everyone for staying longer, especially TDI for their generosity of time and patience. Any other questions?
It's like Lee has a hand up.
Great. Lee?
All right. This isn't really a question, but I'll try and make it quick. It appears that since the original documents were done, that there's been a lot learned. I know I've learned a lot in the last decade. We are very concerned about some of the other things in the river. The turbidity is an indicator. We're not sure it's a great indicator. We're still in the process of learning from the Central Hudson project. And I haven't heard very much about what would happen if there was an effect on one of the water plants. It's, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done before this project could be put through safely. Thank you for letting me speak.
All right, thank you, everybody. I found this presentations and the dialogue absolutely wonderful. The sharing of information is valuable, and I like to keep the lines of communication open for all of us and everybody that's attending here. So next steps, to me would be, we need to put some more time into having a dialogue on this subject so we can get questions and answers and exchange of information. It's hard on a project this complex. It's hard to get anything done in an hour or an hour and a half. So I'd like to propose that we set up a workshop, that go forward and have discussions. And if everybody's agreeable with that, we could set a date and try to work on a time and a format where we can have an open dialogue and discussion on this continuing Chippy project. Does that sound agreeable? Let me first ask the board, the Hudson 7 board, is that agreeable to everybody on the Hudson 7 board?
Yes.
As long as the water treatment operators are invited.
If they're all invited, Shannon, we always open up all of our meetings to, the water plant operators or chief operators to come, all right, and learn more. So yeah, please make sure that they're aware and can attend.
Yeah, well,
that sounds like a yes from our board. Okay. How about those from TDI? Any objection to a workshop?
Obviously we have to, get ourselves organized about when we can do that and what kinds of questions you're going to have. And, I guess I would, again, there's one fundamental that we've talked a lot about, what might be in the river, how we might monitor it. I think we have a lot more detail to share there. I mean, we had a fundamental idea that I haven't really heard much response on. We sort of, and that is that, our ability to notify the operators and pass the intakes, and pass those intakes at a rate of 300 feet an hour, I think is a really, really substantial, I want to talk about it, because if you can shut the intakes down and we can program and schedule to shut those intakes down, I think much of this discussion, it changes the tenor of the discussion in my view. So
I just have to say, in response to that, would you rather talk individually to the municipalities? Because we all have different reserves, and we're in the middle of a water tank project where our reserves are going to be trimmed down tremendously from what they typically are right at the time you're passing by. So I think to workshop this and explain and get the timeline understood would be very beneficial to you to deal with us as a group than individually.
Yeah,
I just behoove you guys to do that.
Absolutely comfortable with doing just that. I just want to make sure, I guess, that I'm not heading down a trail I shouldn't be, respectful of trying to protect the water systems, because it seemed to me to be an effective means to do so. So the timing of that, where you are with your, your infrastructure to store, all those kinds of issues, when we could be there, marrying those dates together, absolutely. But I guess, again, I just want to make sure that, because when we received the letter and we started looking at it and we realized we had a lot of work to do to get everybody to understand the work we have done. But I sort of stepped back as an operator and I said, geez, I'll be by, all these L7 of these water intakes in 2 weeks. So, and I can manage my schedule as to when I pass them. And I understood from the inquiries that had been done historically that storage was available. So, we could shut down for a brief period. And we're talking about a very brief period of time at 300 foot an hour. So, you know what I mean? So I just want to make sure that that's a topic that, because if we're off base with that, with that remedy, if you will, and I'm not saying it's a total remedy, but I think it's absolutely an effective one.
So Randy and then Emily.
My concern is that this is not a river, it's an estuary. It goes 6 miles south and 4 miles north every day. And once you suspend things, they're going to stay out there for a while. I don't know how long. I think we need to look into that more. And I don't know, I mean, maybe we can look near the intake to see what's there more so we can feel comfortable that we're not going to be attacked by that stuff. But I think we really need to know what's going to happen with the stuff that gets suspended.
I'd just like to say that.
Wait, Paul, Emily is next. Go ahead, Emily.
I just wanted to suggest that when the workshop is held, that the DEC and Health Department regulators be included in that, because I'm really grateful that they took the time to participate tonight, and I think that that's an important piece of that workshop discussion.
Great. So Paul, one last comment, and I think we're going to wrap up for this evening and try to work on our next steps.
Emily and I have been working so closely together, she asked my question.
Very good. All right. And mine too, because I was going to extend the invite to everybody that's here tonight and those who aren't here tonight to, as we work forward on a workshop. I'm really appreciative of everybody sharing their dialogue, sharing their concerns, and being forefront in the information, because we're not going to get anywhere unless we communicate. So if so be it, it is now a couple minutes to 7 or a half hour over, in respect of everybody's time. We will work together on setting a date and a workshop and get an invitation out and allow enough time. Okay?
Good night.
All right. Thank you,
all.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you all
Meeting.
Okay. Bye-bye.
so much.
Do we need a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, good, Paul. Thank you. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have a quorum left? Bill? Yes.
That's what I was
Okay.
just checking. Do we? Wait,
Shannon, Neil, myself, Bill.
3-4, we're good. You have a
Hey, turn
quorum.
the audio on.